I have a hypothesis that partition had an unintended positive outcome for India. A major portion of separatists, extremists, jihadists, etc., went to Pakistan. Now we have fewer of these people to deal with, so we could avoid a lot of bad reputation associated with Pakistan, etc. Could India avoid another civil war between separatists and nationalists? Is there anything good that came out of of partition for India? And what would have been the picture if partition didn't happen? See, partition happened because of the Congress party, because of the leadership of Mr. Mohandas Gandhi and Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru and various other Congress leaders. It was all a British agenda. The British used the Congress party and the Muslim League as the tools for carrying out partition. It had a geopolitical objective, like I have spoken about several times, even in just a few minutes ago. So that was the objective of partition, and that is why they did partition. Now, had somebody like Subhash Chandra Bose been successful in his campaign to take back India, to liberate India from the British, let's examine a hypothetical scenario in which Subhash Chandra Bose liberates India from the British and sets up an independent Indian government, independent of the British or the Japanese. Now, would a person like Subhash Chandra Bose have ever allowed partition? Yes, Mr. Gandhi would have been in India. He would have advocated partition. Mr. Jinnah would have advocated partition. Mr. Nehru would have advocated partition. And the various Muslim League leaders, etc., the Khilafat people, etc., would have advocated partition. What would somebody like Subhash Chandra Bose have done? I suspect he would have shot them all. That's the kind of person he was. And that is what he would have done in the face of a demand for partition. For when Subhash Chandra Bose fought for India's freedom, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, etc., fought for him, they bled for him, and they died for him. They died for Mother India. If Subhash Chandra Bose had been successful, there would have been no partition, and any pro partition elements in the country would have been dealt with in a terrible manner. Subhash Chandra Bose wanted dictatorship in India for at least 20 years. In today's world, that would have been called fascism. I don't care what it's called. That's what he would have done had he been the president of India, had he been the leader of India. He possibly could have been a Stalin like figure in India, and he would have stamped out any anti national or separatist opposition thoroughly. So, what you're talking about is that there is so much jihadism and terrorism and extremism in Pakistan because all these elements went to Pakistan. Well, the fact is that had India not been partitioned, had somebody like Subhash Bose been there, he would have dealt with it severely. And today there would be no such elements in the country. He would have ruled India for 20, 30 years with an iron hand, and that iron hand would have ensured that no such thing would have happened. We see history from the perspective of what's happened today. But history could have been very different. It's all about leadership. If you have the right leaders, then such elements and such sentiments simply don't emerge in the country. India has its own distinct culture, a very ancient culture that would eventually have been revived under the rule of somebody like Subhash Chandra Bose. And any separatism would have been stamped out. So I disagree that partition was good for India. India needed a strong leader, an iron fisted leader at the time. When a country emerges from 1,000 years of chaos, it doesn't need liberal democracy. It needs iron rule for 20, 30 years. That's what you see everywhere in the world. It happened in China. Now China is becoming slowly more progressively different from what it was under Chairman Mao. South Korea had 20 years of dictatorship after the Korean War. The Japanese had 70 plus years of American occupation. The Soviets had their own thing. So the fact is that had India not been partitioned and had India had a strong leader like Mr. Bose, then none of these problems would ever have existed. And that is why I have always been saying that partition was a terrible thing for India. We lost our ancestral territories. The territories our ancestors lived in for thousands of years. It is because the British wanted it, and because people like Mr. Gandhi and Mr. Nehru and the various other Congress leaders and Mr. Jinnah, they all ensured that this happens. If Mr. Bose had been there, this would never have happened, and there would have been no jihadism, extremism, separatism, khilafatism, or whatever else in India.